Okay, welcome to this week's research overview on big topic fractions. Did you know that fractions is one of the best predictors of kids being successful in algebra? But there's a lot of issues with teaching fractions. A lot of kids really struggle. So as a former algebra teacher, watching kids come into algebra class, fluency was a big one too, but fractions was the other one. If you don't have a strong conceptual understanding of fractions, it makes algebra very, very long. Okay, so let's go through some different challenges. So some of the challenges, there's 6 of them, and we're going to hit each of these individually. Okay, the first one is the definition. So just talking about the numerator and the denominator. That's great, but etymology, where do these words even come from? The word numerator comes from the word enumerate, which means to count. So that digit, top digit, the numerator, is just a count, 1, 2, 3, 4. The denominator, that denomination, like nombre, is to name. It's the unit size and how to name a fraction. So just talking about the count and the unit size as a fraction to help kids really just have a conceptual understanding of the definition. That's number one. The second really important idea is understanding that fraction is a number. It's of magnitude. Sometimes we just skip that. So one thing, just trying with our vocabulary of calling the fraction a number, that's really important. And then there's that digit on top and the digit on the bottom. A lot of times we use the word number for both those, but the fraction is a number. And so like if you had 3/4, so 3/4, you can look at it and what is the distance? It's between 0 and 1, and it's closer to 1. And so just understanding that magnitude. Or 1/4 is smaller. So 1/4, then the count 2, 3/4. What is the difference? And that is a third issue, is just being able to locate a number, a fraction, on a number line. That's a really important concept. And if you can place a fraction anywhere on a number line, that's one of the best predictors of your understanding of fractions. So check that out first, try that. The next one is just comparing fractions. So understanding a third versus a fourth, the relative sizes. So one of the things we talk about when we define that denominator is that unit size is how many partitions or how many equivalent units to get to 1. So instead of saying parts out of whole, we've changed that for 2 reasons. One, we want that count and unit size, but then what happens when you go past 1? And notice I'm also talking here about visually looking on a number line. The number line and the bar model, the 2 best visual models. If you understand why visual models, check out our other research overviews. But then, so if I go back to comparing fourths and thirds, I've partitioned between 0 and 1 4 times versus 3 times. So the 1/4 size is smaller than the 1/3. So being able just to understand that comparison, and then of course the count. We'll also talk about where we are on the number line. The fifth idea is operations. So just being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So one of the things that we talk about is, it's a structural piece, is the units. And you can only put similar units together. So you have to have equivalent common denominators. Or we also talk about, so same size units. A third and a fourth are different size units. So you have to convert those into another unit. That's where we get into equivalent fractions. And we can partition those so we can actually compare them and start adding and subtracting them. And then another video, we talk about multiplication, division of fractions. That's another really big concept. That becomes really important as well. And then the sixth idea is being able to just solve fractions in real life situations. So where do we see fractions out in the real world, at stores? And then being able to take a story problem, being able to understand, are we adding, subtracting, or multiplying and dividing? A lot of times we'll take story problems, and just by reading it, it's like, I'm not sure whether I should be multiplying or dividing the fractions. We have another research overview on just multiplying and dividing fractions. That's a big concept in itself. So those are the 6 challenges that we have. Another idea with fractions that's really important to think about is there's 5 types. Susan Lehman talks about 5 types of fractions. It starts off around 2nd grade as part whole. So we're really a whole amount, and then like a square, and then we're going to partition it into 4. You can do that in different ways, horizontally, vertically, and then talking about how many parts that you see of it are shaded. And that's really a 2nd grade idea. And then by 3rd grade, you start with the idea of measure. So understanding, and when you think of measure with fractions, you think of that number line. So that gets into a lot of ideas that we just talked about with the challenges. So when you start off with a number line and understanding fraction in a linear format and getting that measure, that is the true understanding of what a fraction is. And then you can also use the number line for operations. That's the next one. So operating on those fractions, you can see the jumps of halves or thirds. The next one, after operations, that was 3. 4 is quotient. Think of a fraction as a quotient, which is division. So 6 divided by 4. So we also look at fractions. So that comes around 4th and 5th grade. And then fraction is a ratio. When you're looking at 6 girls to 4 boys, or 4 boys to 6 girls. 6 fourths, 4 6. So as a ratio, depends on which one you switch, and then that denominator becomes the referent. So, and that's right around 6th grade where you hit ratio, fractions as a ratio. So it's important to know those differences, but thinking fractions as a measure is the most important idea through 3rd through 5th. That's the key. Okay, now let's just highlight some effective instruction. So we do want to be able to focus on the conceptual understanding of fractions. So that's where you do want to have a visual. You want to have an area model, you want to have a bar model or a number line to get kids to really visualize the mathematics. That's really critical. Second, and we talked about this before, is talking about the language. Again, talking about the count, the unit size, be able to have that language to describe what fractions are. And again, we're going to do a try this, check that out, and we'll actually use the language with the visual models to get at that conceptual understanding and the explanation. A third really important instruction, like when you're first learning fractions, we talk about the inactive, iconic, symbolic. You want to be able to have paper strips or some type of physical model first, then move into that visual, the number line bar model, and then move into symbolic. So that's a nice way of really building the understanding so that we keep it long-term over time. Fourth one is always coming back to magnitude, getting kids to talk about and describe the magnitude of fractions. So what is the difference between 7/4, 3/4, and 1/4? And being able to see those relative sizes. That is really important. Sometimes we skip over that. So that has to start right away in 3rd grade. And then the 5th instructional strategy is giving story problems. So letting students read the problem. I like to have them actually use a bar model number line just to describe what's happening in the problem first, and then solving based on one of the strategies that you're trying to teach. That's a really critical idea to make sure that they truly understand math with the fractions, that they truly understand fractions and fraction operations, so that then when they go outside of school, they can actually solve these problems. So hopefully this gives you some new ideas, and now you're ready to transform your knowledge, and then that helps you with your kids and different fraction situations. We hope you really like this. Share this with other educators and parents of kids who are working on fractions, and go ahead and like us and follow us. There's some links below where you can get more information.